Welcome to The Snap with Sydney Jones.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for this week's edition of The Snap. I'm Sydney Jones, your host, and joining me today is someone you all in Broncos country know very well, KOA NewsRadio's Broncos sideline reporter, Susie Wargin. Susie, thanks so much for joining me on The Snap again.
You're very welcome. It's kind of a mouthful, sorry. It's a lot to say for an introduction.
Well, Susie, I know I've seen you here around in the building for practice and at some of the games, but how are you? How have you been so far this season?
You know what? It's been good, Sydney. It's been a joy to be back on the sidelines. It's kind of that whole thing of in 2020, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And the fact that, during last year, during our COVID year, I was in the front row of the stands, which are awesome seats, by the way, and people pay good money to be in those seats. But for what we do, it was hard to kind of get a beat on what was happening on the sidelines. So to be able to be back down there amongst all the players and really kind of see things a little more firsthand, I've enjoyed that. We haven't got to go on the road yet. The NFLPA, as you know, really cranked down on how many people are allowed on the flight. So just because of what's going on with the airline industry, the cost of flights, things like that, we don't go on the road. We still do the games, obviously, but if we're not there, I don't have anything to do sideline wise. So it's been a joy to be back on the actual sidelines this year and have fans in the crowd too. I mean, last year was so bizarre. I tell people this story after they stopped allowing fans in the stands. Halftime is kind of our break, as you know. I mean, that's our time to go to the restroom, do this, do that, because you don't really get a break during the game to do that. And I was down in the front row of the stands and I went up onto the concourse and it was pitch black. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're motion censored lights and nobody had been in there. And I thought, this is truly the apocalypse where there's an NFL game going on down on the field. And there's nobody in the concourse that has turned on the lights or censored the lights to go on in forever. Yeah. So it was so bizarre. And I'm so glad we're out of that and not doing that. And it's just good to be back to a normal state.
Seriously, this season has been really fun for me to watch because, but last year was my first season. So I didn't really experience what Broncos country was like. So that home opener was insane just to see, how energetic Broncos country really is.
Yeah, wait until the Raiders on Sunday, right?
I was just going to say that. I was like, I can't even imagine what they're going to be like on Sunday against the Raiders.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And it's always I know they're saying rivalries are starting to kind of go away in some sports, but I think for people that have been around here for a long time, this weekend, anytime we play the Raiders, it's a huge week, and especially this week.
I think so too. Well, for everyone at home listening, Susie, like you mentioned, you're going to be down on the sidelines for Sunday's Broncos Raiders matchup. So everyone listening, make sure to tune in to 103.5 The Fox and KOA News Radio to listen to her coverage of the game. But Susie, let's dive into this weekend's matchup a little bit. First divisional game of the season here for the Broncos. Both Denver and Las Vegas are coming in 3-2 on the season. Do you think this Broncos team is going to be able to bounce back after back-to-back losses?
You know what, I do, and I don't just say that because I'm a homer at heart and I always say they're going to win. So
I do too.
I know, yeah. So it's hard not to, but I really do. I think that that first loss was so off because Teddy left halfway through and Drew came in, and it was just not that you can't count it as a loss. You have to count it as a loss. But then last week, another kind of just everybody trying to figure out, when injuries happen, where do guys go? What's happening? And the theme this week that we've heard all over the place is, where's the run game? Establish the run, get that going. And I mean, Javonte Williams ripped off some great runs, and then we didn't see him again. And then we didn't see, receptions from some of our biggest receivers and Noah Fant. And it was just weird. And so I'm hoping that maybe this weekend, and especially with everything that's gone on with the Raiders this week, I'm hoping they were super distracted. I don't know that they would be or will be because they're all saying the right thing, saying they aren't, but it's got to weigh on them a little bit. So maybe we can get them a little off balance and play a little bit better ourselves.
Right. I mean, you mentioned the run game, Susie, but is there anything specific that you think this Broncos team really needs to improve upon from last weekend in order to get this win?
Well, the run game is one of them for sure. Pittsburgh had a much more balanced game as far as what Ben Roethlisberger was doing with passing and handing off the ball. So I just think getting that more balanced is definitely key. The offensive line, we've had a couple of injuries there, but we should be back to full speed on that. And then getting our big receivers involved in the game too. And I think that's where a lot of people are like, where was Noah Fant last week? Everybody keeps talking. Every time I do these pieces every week called Look Across the Field. And every head coach so far, with the exception of this week, because we didn't really, well, I guess we did talk to Bisaccia, but it wasn't about Noah Fant. But every coach has talked about how we got to watch out for their tight end, Noah Fant. He's just a special player. He's big, he's tough, and everything else. And I know that Noah's being asked to do some other things, but I think it's time to start throwing him the ball because he can catch it and he can do some great things with the ball. So getting our big guys, the Tim Patricks and the Cortland Suttons kind of back in there. We're seeing, Kendall Hinton and Deontay Spencer, great guys. Smaller guys don't have that girth that those big guys do. So I think getting them more involved is also key.
Well, overall, Susie, what have been your thoughts on Teddy Bridgewater and just his performance so far this season?
You know what? He's been, I think, impressive. I think a lot of people have been pleasantly surprised with Teddy. And I think more so, not only what he's done on the field, he seems to keep his cool. He seems to have the support of all the guys, but also off the field, which I think is so equally as important. And we've heard a number of guys talk about how, hey, I've talked to Teddy outside of here. We're a family. And it hasn't just been guys on offense. It's been Von Miller on defense and on both sides of the ball. And sometimes there can be a little bit of that division in a locker room. And we've seen it where, especially if one side is performing much better than the other side. I mean, you look at our defensive stats, they're top 10 in 8 of the defensive stats going into this game. And so the defense could look at the offense and go, where are you at? We're doing our job. Where are you guys? And you don't see that. You don't sense that. And there's times when guys won't say, hey, we're not divided. We're not this, but you can tell. And, one of the great things about being down on the sideline is being able to look at all of the players and look at how they're interacting with each other. And I see them interacting all the time. When something big happens on one side of the ball, the first guys that are there are not only the backups to that side, but also all the starters on the other side of the ball. So they're really interacting a lot more. I see them talking to each other just more than I have in the past. And because this isn't we're hearing the same story. We've had great defenses and just kind of offenses that haven't done what we want them to do. So I think Teddy is doing a great job executing with the pieces that he has. We've had some injuries and is the most important thing I think is that he's got a cool head and nothing against Drew Lock saying that, he doesn't, because Drew can be, calm, cool, and collected as well. But I also think we saw in the second half of that Ravens game, not necessarily where Drew was, you get thrown into the fire, but as a backup, you're expected to get thrown into the fire and perform. So we just saw the difference there between the two of them. And I think Teddy is bringing a whole different element to this game, in addition to his physical abilities on that mental side.
Right. Like you mentioned, the offense has kind of struggled the past 2 weeks due to injuries and other things. But, a lot of talk this week and, quite frankly, most of the season has just been this offense trying to get off to faster starts here.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the key is to accomplishing that this Sunday?
That is the $1 million question. I know I heard the stat yesterday about how many games in a row it has been. It's been double digits as far as, when they've scored on their first drive. So getting that first score, getting a touchdown on that first drive is so imperative. And I feel like, I end up writing down Brandon McManus's name all the time because he's always going out there scoring field goal after field goal. That's great for his stats and his point total, but that's not great when it comes sometimes to the win and loss factor when the game is all done. You need to have 7, not 3. And so it is just so extremely imperative that they get going, but I don't know what that secret sauce is. Is it establishing that run game a little bit more? Well, last week, Javonte Williams had a 49-yard run, but then we didn't see him again. And so that's a Pat Shurmur question. And he was asked it, I think, about 5 different ways on Thursday.
He was.
And he answers, as best as he can. And he says he doesn't read the things that people write and say about him. I have a feeling he might read some of them, who knows? But I think it's so imperative. I wish I knew the answer to that. And I bet Pat Shurmur wishes he knew the answer to that too. So I think it's just, you just keep going, keep trying and seeing what will work. But what we know has happened the last few weeks hasn't worked. So something different needs to take place.
Right. Teddy was asked that this week too. And I liked what he said. He said, it starts here in the building, starts here at practice, it starts in the meeting rooms. They all feel that sense of urgency. It's just I guess, translating it to the field. So hopefully that is something they do on Sunday.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it was interesting what Teddy said after the game against Pittsburgh, where he basically said, we just didn't quite have it, didn't have that oomph, didn't have that juice, basically,
yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting because usually you won't hear guys say that. And so I thought, if Teddy's feeling that, if your quarterback is feeling that, something was kind of missing, and so you got to find that. You've got to go back and that does start during the week because it all translates to the weekend. So hopefully they've got some things figured out inside the building where you're sitting right now and are getting that, that core figured out.
Well, a little bit about this defense, real quick, Susie. The Broncos secondary, we did see them struggle a little bit against Pittsburgh last weekend. They've got another tough test on Sunday, obviously going up against Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Henry Ruggs. So many more. But, Ronald Darby, he will be returning from his hamstring injury. How do you think Darby's return is really going to help this defense on Sunday?
Well, I think it has to help, right? It's, and like I mentioned earlier, there's 8 stats for this Broncos defense where they're in the top 10. So, against the pass right now, they're 6th in the league. So that's not too shabby. There's a lot of teams that would take that, but you're right. They did struggle. Derek Carr is 2nd in the league behind Tom Brady in passing right now. So Derek Carr he's a big issue. Not only are his targets a big issue, but he's a big issue. And so I think that having that extra help at the secondary is going to be very beneficial. Maybe give a little bit of relief to Justin Simmons. Maybe we won't see Von Miller on a wide receiver, things like that, where you're like, okay, maybe the guys that are supposed to be there should be there. And it helps out a little bit to alleviate some of that pressure on those guys in the back.
Well, Susie, like you mentioned earlier, you just finished your look across the field piece, in which you scout the opponent. So what are Derek Carr and the Raiders saying about this Broncos team?
Well, they didn't say as much about the Broncos team as they did about what's happened in their organization this last week. That was really what a lot of the sound bites were from this week, especially on Wednesday, because that was one of the first times that the media had a chance to chat with them. So, and it was interesting. Derek Carr talked a lot about how, those are good friends. He's sad because he's not, I didn't say good friends with Gruden, but, friendly with Gruden. He knows him as a person, not just as a head coach. And he said, but he was surprised, he was hurt, he was basically feeling all of the emotions. But he said, what, at the end of the day, we've got to go play this game and we've got to go up against the Broncos. So he didn't really go much into what they were focusing on as far as the team goes. It was more so of how can we put all of this stuff that's gone on this week with the headlines aside, compartmentalize that, so that we can focus on this game. And, that was kind of to a man what they were all saying. Basically, I've got to worry about the Broncos. Does this suck? Yeah, it sucks. It's nobody saw it coming. Monday Night Football is when all this stuff kind of comes out. And, their interim head coach, Bisaccia, he was very surprised. He's been by it with John Gruden for years and years. He's been with the Raiders for 4 years. He was with Gruden in Tampa Bay for 8 years. He's been in the league for 20. So he kind of got blindsided by everything too. And it's hard to separate that football side from the emotional side. And that's where I think it'll be really interesting on Sunday to see, not only is it already a charged up game because it's a rivalry and you're going to have fans in the stands that are going to be, saying not very nice things probably. And especially with all of this going on, you're going to, those fans over on the east side, they may not be too kind to that greater sideline. So can you separate it? Can you not turn around and hear that and think about it and put something else out on the field? So I think that will be the interesting thing. Again, they just didn't really say much about the team. It was really all about getting rid of this distraction.
Right. Well, just a couple more here for you, Susie. Whether it's on the Broncos or the Raiders, is there a player to watch that you think might have a big impact on this game?
I think every week I keep rooting for Noah Fant. I keep saying, okay, this is going to be, because I hear these other coaches talk about, we've got to watch out for Noah Fant. So I'm like, all right, it's going to be Noah Fant's week. And then every week it is not. So I really think that, Noah's going to have a breakout game at some point. And that's who I'm really looking forward. I think Cortland's going to have another one. And Tim Patrick, we've got these big wide receivers, and that's where I'm just sitting here going, why are we not using them more? And I think there's going to be a time, there has to become a time where they get thrown to more and we just need those big plays to happen. Von Miller every week it's been so exciting to watch him because I feel like he looks like he's about 10 years younger. I feel like he's the Von Miller that I covered in the Super Bowl, back in 2015. And it's amazing to see how different he is this year. And it's so fun to watch him. Malik Reed, who I just adore, and he's been coming through. If Von's not there, Malik's there. It's like you're seeing his number every single time, or they're both there at the same time. And so I've really enjoyed watching Malik, and he's got such a great story because he was an undrafted free agent out of Reno or out of Nevada. And he's just proven himself. And I just love those guys. They're the Rod Smiths of the world, where you're so excited every week to see what they do next and staying so humble. And just, I appreciate that. So Noah Fant and Malik Reed. There's a long answer to your question.
And to add, Malik Reed is probably one of the nicest human beings I've ever met.
Yeah, I have a great story about him. So the first year I started doing sidelines, which was 3 years ago, that was his first year. He was a rookie. Right. And in the preseason games, we went out to Canton because it was the Hall of Fame game. And so we're out there, we have, 5 or 6 buses, because that's when you have the big, huge team, right? And so we have the media, and as you know, we're usually stuck on the very last bus. We're not supposed to fraternize with the players, and although we do. But what's funny, Malik Reed gets on our bus, and he gets on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid has no idea what he's not supposed to be on our bus. He can be on a regular player bus. That's where he's supposed to be. And there was an open seat next to me, and I was like, you can sit here if you want to. And he goes, okay, thank you. And so we just started chatting, and he was just so nice. And at the end, I said, you're supposed to be on the other bus and not on this one. He's like, he didn't care. We had the best conversation. I found out about his family and, who he was. And so that's why I've always just kind of had like this little special place in my heart for him, because he was just so nice and gracious, happy to be there. And then he makes the team, and then he plays phenomenally. And he's the same guy 3 years later. He hasn't changed, which is beautiful.
And then leads the team in sacks last year.
Yes. Yeah, I know. When Von goes out, he steps right up and he just, he does what he needs to do. So yeah, he's a treat. I really like Malik. I think he's going to go a long ways.
Me too. All right. Last one for you, Susie. Got a score prediction for me?
Oh, I'm so bad.
On the spot.
I know. Yeah. You know what? I do think the Broncos will win. I'm hoping that it's not a close game, but with the way things have been going and all the field goals, it may be a close game. So I am going to say, I'll say Broncos 27, Raiders 24.
I love it. I did a preview show yesterday, and I said Broncos 27, Raiders 20.
Okay, well, we're kind of close then. All right, we'll have to see. We'll have to compare notes afterwards.
Well, Susie, I so appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely, Sydney. Anytime. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of The Snap. Thanks again to Susie Wargin for joining me, and to all of you for tuning in. I'll meet you all right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube next week for another episode.